So I conducted my 24-hour nutrition recall, on a 28-year-old male patient who is 5'5", weighs 170 pounds. His goal was to be, or is, aims to be at 160 pounds. His date of birth is March 19, 1994. The client himself is very active. He is active military, so he is a recruiter, so he is a little bit more sedentary, but he still remains active every day and attends the gym aside from going, attends the gym. He states that he would like to exercise at least one time a day. As of now, because of his tight schedule, he is limited to just one time, but his goal is to lose 2 pounds per week, depending on his diet and his exercise routines. So I asked the client to describe what his diet consisted of on April 7th. And these are the times that he dictated he ate these following meals, how he prepared them, and where they were consumed. So at 800 on April 7th, he ate an egg white omelet, an egg omelet with 3 eggs, with 1 slice of ham and 1 slice of cheese. He prepared this using a stainless steel bowl, and he cooked it with a tablespoon of olive oil, and he says that he wiped it with a napkin on the pan, and he removed the excess just so it wouldn't be greasy. And he also drank 8 ounces of milk and 1 cup of coffee. He ate this at home, so on a ceramic plate, and after that he went to work. At 10 o'clock in the morning, he ate 1 banana and a small pack of the Kirkland pre-packed snacks, which consisted of small cheese cubes and a handful of dried fruits and nuts, such as almonds, cashews, and dried cranberries. And he has a jug, like this one, which monitors an intake of 1,800 milliliters per day of water. So by 10 o'clock, he was at 400 ounces of water already consumed. At 12 o'clock, he had ate 3 hard-boiled eggs, 1 skinless chicken breast with no seasoning, stating just lime juice because he doesn't really like using too much salt, 1 cup of broccoli, and at this point he was already at 700 milliliters total volume of water. He boiled the hard-boiled eggs at home but brought them in a plastic baggie. The chicken breast, he said he was cooked on a stainless steel pan, and it was fresh, it wasn't frozen, but the broccoli was unfrozen from a Costco bag, and he steamed it using the microwave, and the rice was cooked in a pan and only uses the water to steam it and cook it, or fluff it, as he said. At 1500, 4 ounces of steak strips from Kirkland with 1 bell pepper and an onion, cilantro, and a teaspoon of salt were used to cook the steak, otherwise known as a fajita recipe, with 1 tablespoon of olive oil and 1 cup of steamed rice. He states he measured his intake with the scale, so he measured his amount of steak that he actually used, stating it was 4 ounces, and that he just added a little pinch of salt, or a teaspoon of salt, because he thought that the steak tastes better seasoned, and he didn't want to use any additive ingredient to his meal. At 1700, he had ate 2 oatmeal banana pancakes, which were prepared at home using oats, oat milk, a banana, and an egg. And at this time, he had drank 1,200 milliliters of water. So the client states that he uses a blender to mix his products, and he uses olive oil to cook his pancakes, but again, very lightly, and then tries to wipe it off just enough to coat the pan so it doesn't stick. And then he lets them chill at night so he can take them to work to eat at work, because he won't be able to make it on time to eat them at home because he works long hours and sometimes they differ, so he'd rather have his meals with him just in case. So he states that after 1800, he does not like to eat anything else, because when he comes home, which is around 9-10 p.m., he doesn't like to work out feeling full, because then he'll feel like he has to vomit, he feels nauseous, or that makes him just demotivate himself from actually completing the workout. So I did ask him if there were any additional intake, like alcohol, like throughout the day, like when he got home, like if he wanted to take beer to relax or anything like that. And he said no. And as far as like carbohydrates, I asked him, do you like to eat breads, bagels, or any like granola bars throughout, like as far as snacks in between? He says no, that he tries to limit his carbohydrate intake as much as he can, especially with all the tortillas and bread. He tries not to eat them. So he limits himself to at least 2 cups, at most 2 cups of white rice a day, if that. But then again, that would be pushing it. So he says that he doesn't really like carbohydrates and he doesn't like sweets as much either. So at first when I saw his intake, I was like, oh, he eats pretty healthy. I don't think that he would need much. Maybe just an increase in fiber. He mentioned the oatmeal pancakes, but since it's with banana, I felt like that would constipate the patient more, especially with a lot of protein that he's eating, like the eggs, and the protein-rich meats, like the chicken and the steak. I just thought that, he would need another source of fiber to kind of help him be able to empty out his bowel a little bit better without straining himself. And then I feel like he should also consider switching from from the egg consumption, because it seems like he incorporates it a lot throughout the day. So maybe substitute it for like omega-3 fatty acids, such as using supplements like fish oil, or even including some salmon into his diet, just to change the proteins and how heavy they are on his GI system. And just as by looking at his intake and just off the top of my head, a guess of what his caloric intake would be, I honestly assumed that he would be at 1,600 calories. After I entered the data through my MyFitnessPal account and logged in his meals and his calories, I was actually extremely surprised at what the data showed. So his calories per day, his goal is, if he wants to lose 2 pounds and reach his goal weight at 160, he's supposed to eat 1,780 calories a day. But adding on all the food intake that I just described, he totaled at 3,864, minus the 798 due to his exercise training, which was bench press with the machine, the use of a Peloton bike, and then a stair treadmill ergometer, which is like a Stairmaster. So he states he spends 30 minutes on that, which burns 336 calories. A Peloton bike, which 45 minutes, 462 calories. And unfortunately, though, the app failed at monitoring the calories burned with the bench press machine. So he might be just missing a couple of calories from there. But as of now, the deficit is that he overate 1,286 calories, which I didn't think was going to be the case. But one of the biggest tolls that this study took, and it was good for him to kind of see, and he was surprised too. He's like, what? Like, I'm eating healthier than I have before. Like, I would eat sweet breads and more carbs, so you would think that, this is the right diet based off like what he's seen on social media or friends tell him and whatnot. But he was really surprised that this was there was actually a deficit in his diet. So one of them being that the hard-boiled eggs alone exceeded 300 milligrams of cholesterol per day. So he exceeded it by over 148 on just the eggs alone. If we're looking at cholesterol overall, give me a second. So cholesterol overall, he was, for cholesterol, he was at 1,053 milligrams, so he exceeded it by 3 times as much. So that can definitely take a toll on his health, cause him any comorbidities like hypertension, cholesterol. So that was definitely something that was super high in cholesterol, as well as the grilled chicken breast. The grilled chicken breast actually was 170 milligrams of cholesterol, which I was surprised. Maybe had he ate it alone, it would have been a little bit better. So yeah, that was definitely high up there. Another thing that was elevated was the sodium intake. So the sodium intake, according to the University of California, San Francisco Healthline, is actually supposed to be limited to a quarter of a teaspoon. The client used a full teaspoon in his dinner, not accounting for all the sodium that the other meals would entail. Even if it was like, the ham itself, even though it was turkey, it still had sodium. And also the prepackaged snacks still had sodium as well, not accounting also the hard-boiled egg that also has sodium, and the cheese used throughout and the dairy also has sodium. So that was definitely something he didn't account for. um, Another thing that surpassed was um, his sugars. I was so surprised, and so was he, that the fact that at his sugar intake it was supposed to be at 97 grams per day, and the steak itself was 57 grams. So it was like a little bit more than half, which is surprising because if you think of meat, you think protein, healthy, it keeps you full. It's a good thing for your muscles, for your endurance, for everything. No, it actually had a lot of sugar. So that was something that he didn't know that steak could translate over to. Um so yes, my client definitely went over the calories, and according to the American Heart Association, his use of cholesterol can also put him at risk for heart disease, hypertension, diabetes, and coronary vascular disease. So, one of the recommendations that they had was to substitute some of his proteins for fish 2 times a week, 2 servings for a week. It would definitely benefit and help elevate his high density lipids rather than the lower density lipids. So, that would be a good substitute for him. And to substitute also the eggs for fruits. Definitely fruits are a healthier source of sugars, and a different snack that can lessen his cholesterol intake. And being that he's being so active and working out, it is easier for him to burn the sugars from a fruit than processed sugars like from different sources throughout his diet. One of the micronutrients that I saw that he actually met all of them. He met his fiber intake, he met his vitamin A, vitamin C, and his fiber as well, and his iron. He actually met all of them, so he surpassed them. He wasn't deficient on any of them. The only one he was slightly deficient on was his potassium, just because there was little to no leafy greens in there. So maybe the consumption of spinach or other ingredients that are heavy in potassium. Bananas maybe, but because bananas also have a lot of sugar, that would be a contradictory point. So looking for other options would be a much better source for him. But other than that, he was on spot with his micronutrients, but the macros, like the carbohydrates, he was under with his carbohydrates. His carbohydrate goal was 50%, and he's actually at 37. So that was one of his goals, to avoid a lot of carbs, and he actually met that. But as far as fat, he surpassed it by 2%. And the protein, his diet's supposed to be consistent of 20% protein, and he actually exceeded it by 11%, so being at 31%. After looking at all this data, after looking at American Heart Association statistics and the University of San Francisco medical database, it is important for the client to reduce his salt intake to just a quarter tablespoon per day. It is super, super, super important to prevent coronary artery disease, and the patient does have this history of heart disease and hypertension and stroke, so he is predisposed at attaining these conditions as well. As far as reducing his cholesterol, it's super important for him to monitor his cholesterol levels at less than 300 milligrams per day. Making those suggestions like substituting for fish and other lean proteins. No canned fish, because those are considered high in sodium as well. So we want to make sure that he kind of goes on a better route, and where he doesn't have those heavy proteins that contain a lot more cholesterol. And we want to elevate the high density lipids versus the low density lipids, which the low density lipids can cause atherosclerosis and more cardio deficits. Again, his sugar intake was elevated, and it was surprising to see that it came from a protein, but maybe the use of yogurt or fruit, a more natural source, will definitely have more benefits for him to burn it off easier than processed ingredients as well. And I hope that this was an eye opener for the patient as much as for me, and I will definitely be using this app a lot more and monitoring what I eat.